Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine Torres-Allen, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State. Today in the show, Jasmine and I talk trauma-informed childcare and the things we wish people told us, and later Chief Policy Officer of 0 to 3, Miriam Calderon, joins us to discuss those first 1,000 days. New Hampshire Family Now is brought to you by the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. Since 1962, the Charitable Foundation has worked hand in hand with generous and visionary citizens to maximize the power of giving and support, collaborate, and lead innovative initiatives. Initiatives like New Hampshire Tomorrow, which is focused on making sure children and families have access to education, healthcare, and career pathways to ensure every family member thrives. To learn more about New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and all their initiatives, go to www.nhcf.org. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org. Jasmine, it's so good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
So good to see you, Nathan.
So things are good with you and the family?
Yeah, things are good. I don't know if I've told you this before, but I'm fostering to adopt my son, and we're having a tough time with adjustment. And as any parent or caregiver who's experiencing that, sometimes that can be kind of a big deal. And unfortunately, we're having to shift daycares because now we're thinking about trauma-informed care. So something that I've been working with this caseworker on is finding childcare that has those supports in place or understand or, that they're moving forward towards having, information like that. And so I wish I had known about that when I had my daughter.
You're right.
When I was looking for, childcare for her. And
have you found a different array of services or even approach to the way they kind of process care for children?
I haven't seen it yet. And I haven't, and quite honestly, I haven't found a childcare center yet that has those supports in place. And I don't know if it's just because I'm lost in the noise, as a lot of that happens to a lot of parents and caregivers, is that they get overwhelmed by the amount of information out there. Or the amount of tools that might be out there. And you don't exactly know how to navigate those tools.
But you knew that you needed something that wasn't happening for you.
Yes, exactly.
So tell me how you knew that some other approach needed to be.
Well, I took the lead of the daycare teachers that we had originally. And, they were smart enough to say, hey, we're not exactly the best support for your child. And at first I was angry because I was like, here's my son. It's been in the first 3 years of his life, he's had so much change and such a, lots to add to his background. And all I wanted was stability. And so my first reaction was anger, right? Because I was like, well, how could you give up on him so quickly? Because I personally don't want to do that. Right. And so I had to switch my perspective a little bit. And, and the language that they chose was perfect, which was that we're not the best people to support him in the way that he needs.
I mean, that's kind of a relief. I mean, after you get over the offense of it, right?
Yes.
Because, I remember we had a kind of interesting experience in our first childcare center as well, where they were like, look, this is not working. And we were kind of like, how dare you a little bit. Right. Because it almost feels like this is one of those things that I wish I knew before I had kids, that you don't have to internalize their behavior as a reflection of who you are.
Exactly. Because that's where my mind went first.
Exactly. And so then you come in fisticuffs, right? And
because you're ready to defend them and, maybe excuse their behavior.
Right.
And then you're like, it was one of those moments where I had to reparent myself, right? Ooh, I know that's a tricky word, but going back to that topic of like unlearning and relearning, right? Because I've watched my parents come in, guns a-blazing, ready to go for me and not correct me on the things that I might have needed correcting on. And so,
and that becomes your crutch.
It does. And so you kind of lean on that crutch, and then you realize the crutch is knocked out and you're like, wait a minute, how do I deal with this? So I had to kind of get over the anger first, which was that first reaction, and then take a step back, kind of reparent and think about, okay, they use the words like, we can't support him in the way that he needs. And it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, we need somewhere that that's going to be able to provide him with the emotional support and with that one-on-one interaction that a child might need.
Honestly, the second thing that I actually think about in terms of I wish somebody told me is that parenting actually forces you to confront the way you were raised, and then you collide with it.
Yes.
And this is something that I attribute to Caleb Rainey, who had a wonderful interview in the past about anger being almost a secondary emotion, because if you follow it to the root, there's something else there, right? There's this some other kind of live wire that you're looking to untangle, but you come in like with your feathers up, and then you realize that you're actually not listening.
Exactly. And that's something I pride myself on deeply in the community, right? As being a good listener. And when it comes to your own child, though, it was like a defense mechanism, because then I was like, well, this is on my parenting skills. And in reality, like you think about like that phrase of, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, your daycare teachers and your educators are a part of that village. And when they're expressing concern,
right,
it's that moment where we have to kind of step back and listen and understand like, hey, there's something here. We need to work together as a team.
Yeah. I'm almost coming to the realization that every human being I see, I'm like, you're part of my village. You're part of my village.
Exactly.
I feel like once they get the tax bill, they're going to be like, what?
Yeah.
Nathan bill. But it's so true, because it's almost like the proximity of the people in your life, from daycare folks to you, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
So what does that leave you with now? Tell me about how that, I don't want to call it a confrontation, but that need for support arises or manifests. Do you even understand it yet?
See, that's the thing, is that because I've never experienced this before, I am in that like, all right, how do we figure this out land? You know what I mean? And so, first thing I normally do is go to my pediatrician. That's like my number one go-to. I think as a parent, you're like, all right, I guess it's time to call the pediatrician. Because you don't know where to start. And my pediatrician was really great and was like, looking back at his history, you have to understand that in 3 years, he's had so much change that transforms into trauma. I didn't view it as trauma. I viewed it as change. I didn't view it as trauma. And so that changed my perspective a little bit. Right. And then it was actually my boss that, I was having this conversation with her, and she was really great at listening to me. And she was like, Jasmine, it sounds like he just needs trauma-informed care. And I was like, boom, there it was. You know what I mean? Like that was the language I think I needed to be able to say, okay, now when I'm looking at daycare centers, that's the language I'm going to use in terms of what I'm looking for.
It's so interesting in that, because it's causing me to actually look at myself and say, wait, what do I need in terms of my ability to understand my own upbringing?
And communicate it too.
But part of that, I guess, relating to your current experience is like, oh my gosh, not only realizing that the child in your care needs something, but we may need something in order to hear more clearly what they need.
And even ask for the things you might need, right? Because like trauma-informed care, that I was like, oh, there's the language I need, because I didn't know how to ask either. Right. I was like, what exactly am I looking for, and how do I ask for it? Yeah. And sometimes as a parent, you just don't have the language. No. You only have what you can explain. And even then people are like, well, there's this, and this, and there's lots of tools, but if you don't have the right phrase or the language, sometimes you don't exactly get what you need.
Yeah. What is your deferred tool then? When you hit this block of non-understanding, I want to call it the Darien Gap. You know what the Darien Gap is?
No, I don't.
It's that space between Panama and Colombia, which it's a forest so dense that it just is like off grid.
Oh.
So your own personal little Darien Gap.
Yes.
So when you hit that, what is your tool to essentially give you a bit of light?
Talking about it, because I have been able to find the right words because I've been talking about my situation. And I think that what ends up happening is like sometimes when we don't know what to do, we kind of keep to ourselves about it, and we don't know how to express it or communicate it, and we just let it fester. And then it just kind of explodes eventually because we're so overwhelmed by not knowing how to ask for what we need.
Right.
I've come to learn that if I talk about it or talk about the situation, everybody has different inputs and opinions, but eventually someone's going to say the right thing that just clicks on the light bulb for you. And then you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know what but it took me having to open up about the experience, because at first I was embarrassed about it. I was like, oh my God, he's getting kicked out of daycare. This is not good.
Yeah.
And so, and I thought of it as a reflection on me. And so I got really sad. I got really angry. It was almost like the stages of grief. Right. And so then I started talking about it. And then that's when people were like, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you tried this? And I just, it was like one of those like moments where I was like, dang, people really should be talking about this more, because even if you're, a caregiver and you're not fostering, having those resources in place, like maybe your child has experienced some sort of trauma and you didn't know that asking for trauma-informed care really makes the difference.
When we call the pediatrician, or you know what, we leave a message, they call us back. That kind of phone tag. It strikes me that the number one thing that they offer is comfort, that it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And it's normal.
Yes.
That what you're experiencing might be unique to your family situation, right? But that it's going to be okay.
Right.
And then once you have that, then all of a sudden you start to talk about solutions.
Exactly. And sometimes it's just, and honestly, for me, it was talking about the situation, even feeling embarrassed or sad or mad about it, because then you had those people who are like, oh, I feel bad for you. And it's just one of those moments where you're like, oh, please let this earth swallow me. But at the same time, it's those those people that you talk to, that you go to for your supports. Maybe there are other parents in your area that you can talk to.
You're going to have to knock on wood about that earth swallowing you. I'll tell you what, I wish somebody gave me a heads up that I would worry about climate change the way I do now.
I mean, if you look outside, you can see the haze from wildfires. People are talking about having sore throats while they're just hanging out outside. It's literally in our air and it's staring right at our faces.
If I'm not mistaken, that is, I just saw you posting, but this is what you're learning.
This is what I'm learning. And, it's not particularly something new I've been learning, because I used to be, in a former life, I used to be a chef. And so, a big thing about being a chef for me was learning about the ugly food movement and how we utilize food that farmers are sometimes throwing away or incorporating back into the soil, but they're perfectly good food and just not accepted by, supermarkets because it doesn't look good. And so going back to a lot of our NHPBS resources that you can find on nhpbs.org, one segment that I really love is all about Enviro. And so it really talks about how humans impact our natural resources. And it goes really in depth. It's short videos and really cute, really easy activities to get done if you're ever wanting to have a conversation around it. But, I think it's important to start having even deeper conversations about what sustainability looks like for our state. Yeah. And so, just kind of referring back to the New Hampshire Business Review article that just came out about how food pantries are struggling to provide fresh foods right now. And that is something we should really be scared about, because as food prices are rising, we need to start figuring out how we're going to sustain as a state agriculturally. Right. And, in terms of food insecurity, how are we going to feed our people?
Tell me that there's a silver lining.
Oh, there's always a silver lining, right?
Don't make me call a pediatrician. For real, though.
There's projects like the Gleaning Project, right? That goes around the state, goes to farmers, actively purchases these produces from the farmers that, don't necessarily look good, but then they bring them to organizations like the Boys and Girls Club or New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, or, wherever these food pantries are, and they're bringing in this fresh produce to be able to feed their communities.
As a family policy, we only buy carrots that look like tiny pairs of pants.
With the really long stem.
Long stem like a ponytail. And when we come back, Miriam from 0 to 3 joins us. Don't go anywhere. Today's episode was brought to you by Upreach Therapeutic Equestrian Center. Located in Goffstown, New Hampshire, Upreach partners with the Power of Horse to create strong children, strong families, and strong communities. To learn more about Upreach Therapeutic Equestrian Center and its many inspirational programs, visit upreachtec.org. That's upreachtec.org. Today's show was also brought to you by Burgoo Media, a full-service media company dedicated to helping nonprofits realize impact stories for print, video, radio, social, and legacy media, and more. Both budget-conscious and grant-friendly, Burgu Media helps your organization celebrate the humans in human services. Learn more at burgumedia.com. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today on the show, I'm incredibly excited to welcome Miriam Calderon, Chief Policy Officer at 0 to 3, a national organization that works to create lasting, transformative change for children, their families, and our future. Miriam, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, of course, 0 to 3 refers to age, that period of time that's best described as infancy come, say, toddlerhood. And yet your organization is working toward lasting, transformative change well into the future. Why are these first 3 years so critical to us as human beings?
Well, because here's what we know, Nathan. During this period of time, this period 0 to 3, which sometimes we refer to as like the first 1,000 days, right? What we know is that brains grow faster than in any other period in our lives, and that this lays the foundation for everything that is to come in our future health, our future learning. And so what we know is happening is that our brains are forming these neural connections and pathways. Sometimes that's talked about as like the architecture of the brain is forming. And these pathways are forming really based on the kinds of experiences and the relationships and the connections that we are experiencing during the infant and toddler period. And those experiences and relationships that matter the most are the ones with the most important adults in our lives, our caregivers and our families. And so what we really emphasize and what we want families and we want policymakers to know is that this is a period of enormous potential and that it is really about early connections and experiences. And when we're doing that, we're literally building babies' brains. And if we do that well, we can set the foundation for health and wellness and success in school well into the future.
What do these first years tell us then about our lifelong trajectory? If we are supported physically and emotionally, what do the studies actually say?
Yeah, I mean, so, the research is telling us, again, incredible opportunities. So when we have strong early connections, and that includes, right, the well-being of the most important adults in our lives in those relationships. So when we have, for example, good health for mothers and pregnant people, that will facilitate healthy births. When we have families, right, who are in safe environments, who are present, can provide nurturing care, can bond, form positive relationships. When we have good nutrition, right, these things will lead to healthy social emotional development, good physical health, right? During these early periods, healthy development, cognitive development, all of these things, right, that help ensure that development is on track and on course for later learning. What we know about these neural pathways is they're literally shaped by this experience and these relationships. So if they don't develop and form, they wither away. There are not opportunities later to develop them. What we know is that the interventions to do so are costlier, and it is more difficult to do so later. That's why we're always saying it's important to capitalize on this period and get it right from the start.
And conversely, if we're missing those supports, what do the studies tell us then?
Right. We do know a lot from the research too about, the impacts of adversity, right? And we do know as well that while this is an important period of opportunity, it is also a time of, vulnerability. But we also know about resilience. So we never want, families to feel at all like, oh, I got it wrong, or there was an experience, that potentially maybe could have undermined development, right? Or some kind of adversity. We want families to be and feel empowered by this information, but we want people to know the importance of acting to get it right from the start. But we do know from the same studies that infants and toddlers are incredibly resilient. And again, if there are these kinds of experiences, it is important to intervene early as well and make sure that there are the right kinds of supports and interventions. And we know we never want anybody to feel hopeless about this, right? Because babies are resilient, our brains are resilient, and we can overcome experiences with the right supports.
As a father of young children myself, I have to say that when we talk 0 to 3 years old, that was the most chaotic period of my life by far.
Right.
I mean, we are financially unstable, not well physically given the demands of raising children. Our mental health, of course, suffered. We weren't sleeping, nutrition, all of it. And I'm pointing this out because, as you say on your website, each baby's potential is unlimited, but the window of time to provide a child with a foundation for success is not. It is limited. Now, knowing my experience is less the exception and more the rule, what policy level solutions can we pursue to make sure parents and caregivers like me have what they need to support healthy development in that 0 to 3 pocket?
Yeah, absolutely. So we think about this really, in the context of, again, going back to what do we know in babies and toddlers need to thrive? Good health, positive early learning experiences, and strong families. So really framing it around those 3 outcomes. And then within that, we center really the experience, for babies to thrive, their families and their caregivers have to be thriving as well, right? So when we think about good health, again, we're thinking about parents need to be well. They need to be rested. Their mental health needs to be strong. So that stress, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're stressed, if you're not sleeping, if you're concerned, if you have economic concerns, safety concerns in your community, right, that is not good for the development of your baby or your toddler. So it's that classic, put your own oxygen mask first.
Right.
So when we're talking about, how do we ensure the healthy development of babies and capitalize on this period, we're always thinking about as well the health and well-being of the caregiver. When we think about positive, strong families as well, we're thinking about what are those supports for families and understanding child development, right? How to promote positive development. Where are they getting those kinds of supports in the community? We're also thinking about economic security, right? We're thinking about, families are working, are they economically secure, stable housing, jobs that allow you to be able to make ends meet, right? Provide for your family nutritious meals, transportation. All of these kinds of things are essential for families to be able to have that time, right? That time to bond, to fully be present, which is just so critical, right? To being able to capitalize on this really important period. And the other one is positive early learning experiences.
Right.
And there we see the benefit is twofold. It is for families and it is for the child. So we know that high quality, affordable childcare, early education experiences are essential to lifting families into opportunities. Most infants and toddlers now, the majority in our country have all available adults in the workforce, right? But all adults need to be working to be able to make ends meet in their families. And so we're seeing more and more needs in the infant toddler period for childcare. And so having it be affordable, having it be safe, having it be a caregiver and an important connection point for the family, somebody that is really partnering with the family to support development is essential. It's a key support to reduce that stress for families. And we know that those experiences contribute to children's learning and development. Those environments and those caregivers are contributing greatly to children's learning and development. So, those are a number of the policies that we are advocating for at 0 to 3. And what we really do is look to places like, state of New Hampshire that are making wins on their own and making investments in being able to, support these policies that foster greater economic security, policies that help families with very young children make ends meet, investing in childcare, policies like paid leave that allow time for bonding, good health, mental health supports, family supports, all of these are critically important. And then we believe that we need greater federal investments too to really be able to partner with states, because we know the reality is that most states aren't going to be able to achieve all of these policies for all the children and families in their states without greater support from the federal government. We think it's important that we get, the federal government to invest more, that states do what they can, and that we have that partnership so that we can really make this available for all children and families across our country.
Now, I'm thrilled to say that New Hampshire is moving in the right direction, as noted in our most recent budget. But if people want to learn more about your organization, where can they go?
Absolutely. So I really encourage folks to check out www.0to3.org, as well as our thinkbabies.org website, so you can learn more about these policies and how you can take action to support them.
Miriam, thank you so much for coming on the show today and all the work you do at 0 to 3.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Many thanks to the Samuel P. Hunt Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. Established in 1951, Samuel P. Hunt Foundation is a Manchester-based, independent nonprofit that provides grants primarily for the arts, children and youth services, faith-based organizations, educational institutions, healthcare, and human services. This podcast was brought to you by Nixon Peabody, who delivers exceptional legal services for clients in the community by combining high performance, an entrepreneurial spirit, deep engagement, and an unwavering commitment to a culture of collaboration, diversity, and humanity. Nixon Peabody works with universities, hospitals, and nonprofits of every size to maximize impact. For more information, visit nixonpeabody.com. Today's show was also brought to you by Merrimack County Savings Bank, who proudly supports the mission and efforts of New Hampshire Children's Trust. Founded in 1867, Merrimack has served people, businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities in central and southern New Hampshire for over 155 years by treating everyone with care, respect, and compassion. Visit your local offices in Bow, Concord, Kentucky, Hooksett, and Nashua, or go to www.themerrimack.com.